Welcome, everybody. It is very good to see you here. We are looking forward to a rich and lively conversation. And the big picture. Hold on, I need to just make sure I've got the enable waiting. So waiting room is off. People can unmute themselves. Okay, we are good to go. Welcome to the Nature Journal Educators Forum. Today's topic, we are going to be talking about money and funding and making your nature journaling educator work sustainable, and sort of we'll be kind of talking about the business side of things. And before we do, I want to address that talking about money is weird. Talking about money is weird. And in the culture that I grew up in, talking about money is really weird. Like somehow it's if you're talking about this sort of stuff, then there's sort of an impropriety to it. Also, there is, I want to just sort of start out by kind of calling out what I think is an inconsistency in the way which we kind of think about money that applies to us, and I think it makes it a particularly difficult thing for us. If somebody is doing, sorry, thought I had muted that, but now I have. So here's a couple of thoughts. One is that I'm thinking about my telephone and I've totally lost my train of thought. Let me see if I can get my train back on the rails. Idea number one. Oh yeah. So here's idea number one. Idea number one is that if somebody is doing something for the public good, right, and they're doing a service that is important in the community and good in the community, there is the idea comes up that if they're doing it and it's for the good, then they should be doing it for free. They should be doing it for free, because if you're charging money for it, you're a sellout, or you're in it for the wrong reasons, or that you that you're like the idea of the starving artist is popular, and so now we're starving artist educators. So and who makes less than the artists? It's the educators. But if an artist actually is economically successful, then they get a lot of pushback. People start saying that, oh, you must be a sellout. You know, you're a commercial artist now, just because you can put, peanut butter between the two slices of your bread, and that's not fair. Artists and people who are working for the public good have an equal right to sort of comfort in living as everybody else does. If somebody is an investment banker, nobody thinks twice about the idea that they charge money for their services. and we don't call them a sellout. But if you're doing something that is for the public good, all of a sudden you're a sellout if there is money involved. And I think that the result is that when we kind of frame things that way, the work which we do is automatically unsustainable. It's not something that we can continue to do year after year after year and grow and develop, because eventually we need to get a real job. And so it is, if the work is unsustainable, at some point you do have to stop and start doing something else. And so that means that we cannot build this into something greater. I think what we're doing here is really important. I think that the world needs this, and it is a real value. I also think it's important to make this work sustainable for the people who are developing this work, and not just sustainable, but I would say sustainable plus. So I think my goal in kind of thinking about these sort of things is the idea of sustainable plus, which is the idea of that it is sustainable, but there's also then a little bit of padding so that you can also put something into your savings. And you also have a little bit of economic room to be able to, like, you're not just worrying about, like, you know, how am I going to pay the bill tomorrow, so that you've got a little bit of room to also grow what you're doing. Both, sometimes it takes capital to invest in that, and sometimes, you know, like, you know, you might be getting yourself a new camera. You might be also just sort of having the room to think about, you know, what, you know, how do I want to grow this? So it gives you room to grow, and it gives you room to plan. And the final thought that I have in this is that also embedded in this work is, in this community, I think there's beautiful generosity that has been given by lots of people on all sides. Generosity from people who have supported educators, generosity from educators developing content, and we are getting stuff out to, and the people who are developing stuff have different levels of needs, and they're also the people who are using the programs which we develop have different abilities in different cases to give. So with those thoughts in mind, I'm really looking forward to a discussion of thinking about our funding and finances, and I hope that we can have a productive discussion here. Also, to be able to discuss how can we, you know, well, let me stop monologuing and just turn this over to the community here. Does anybody have any thoughts, comments, or ideas on this topic? Let's start with Melinda. Melinda, thank you so much for being here, and also thank you for what you are bringing to the nature journaling community in the programs that you've been developing.
Absolutely. And thank you, Jack, for setting this up, this conversation. And I know that this is going to benefit so many more people than the 23 people that are in this call right now. And I have a feeling that this is not going to be finished today in an hour, that we're introducing some topics. And thank you, Jack, for acknowledging that in your personal life, it's not something that was spoken. And I think we all have our own money family stories. Like, how did we grow up to be where we are right now with our relationship with money? And on your, Jack and I have talked many times about programs, financing programs, patronage, charging money, accepting money, being sustainable. How do I make sustainable plus? It takes a while to get comfortable with new ideas, to unpack things. I've been an entrepreneur for over 30 years, on and off. I've also worked as an employee in other places. And yeah, it's easy when you're an employee. You get a paycheck. Someone else determines your worth, your value. You accept that agreement, you sign up, you do your work, and they give you a paycheck. I've also had periods of time in my life where I was pushed into entrepreneurship, or I should say invited. Life has invited me into entrepreneurship. And I've learned so much about myself, about society, about the work that I do, about money, and it is still ongoing. Today, I am so much more comfortable with money and my relationship with it, and understanding the expectations and ideas that I have accepted, whether they're good or bad. They just become part of my awareness. And I'm starting this off with that because I want everyone to feel like it's okay wherever you are with your relationship with money. I've also learned, want to try to kind of distill it, but really what Jack is saying, everything he said, bullet point, listen to the video, write this down. It's what we also hear from other mentors who talk about money. It's the same thing, but it's in our community. We have so much love and generosity. And so I approached Jack because I see so many of you sharing your experience and your expertise with nature journaling or art or nature or science, whatever it is, out into the world. And there is one model where we do this out of generosity and we open to receiving donations. But what I see are some people struggling with that model and holding on to that model, believing that that's the only way to allow income to help us be sustainable. So I wanted to share some of the different things that I've done in my business in the last 2 years. And maybe today's not the appropriate thing. Maybe that's another conversation to talk about what are we doing with our work. I kind of want to just tap into a few mindset ideas that pop up in the conversation, is going along with sustainable plus. I love it, Jack. That idea always pops up again. And it's going to take a while for all of us to just really feel it and hear and believe that we are worth it. Because even I will have ideas when I'm creating a new program and I assign a financial exchange, like a dollar amount. There's a feeling that rises, and we all get it. And so I think some of it is shifting. It's not, I hear the language too. I've learned that language is so important. The words that I use to describe what I feel reflect what happens in my world. So if I said, I can't afford it, I just can't afford it. I can't afford it. That's too much money. Like, who has that kind of money? You can't afford it. You can't, that kind of language. What that does when I'm in that mindset is nothing out there is something that I can't afford. Even if I want it badly, I'm going to push it away because I feel like I can't afford it. There have been times where I have signed up for programs that I did not have the money right away, but I knew the value. I knew that what they were offering was exactly what my heart needed, what my mind, my body needed at the time. And I rearranged my priorities to make it work. I also approached the person and say, look, this is really feels right, but currently this is not in my means to pay. Is there a way that we could work together? So I want to give you all permission to have that conversation with whatever program that you are offering or ready to sign up for. There is no, you might have fears of like, well, that's asking for a handout. It's not asking for a handout. I'm welcome any of you who come to any of my programs that have a price tag. If you really feel like it's the right thing for you, you want to do it, you want to exchange money with me for the value that you get, but that price tag is not within your means, then to have some courage and trust and approach me or whoever and say, can we work something out? What's the worst that can happen? The person says no, and then you move on, right? But we're not, I think in our culture, we don't talk about that. We put labels, right? Asking for help is bad. Asking for a reduction price is bad. Asking for support, right? Somehow in America, we need to do this all ourselves. We don't. We have a community here. You can lean on each other. So I love that Jack has opened this conversation up where we can share ideas. We can share what's been working. I have tried a bazillion different formats. Those of you who have known me have, come to some of my free nature journaling donation-based programs. You've also come to programs that I put a price tag on because I value and honor my time. This is the other piece is I think it has to do with my own self-esteem and my own value. If I don't value myself and I do everything for free, then you won't value me. And there's this phenomenon, you can probably look this up, that people will value something with a price tag more than they value something that's free, right? So even if it's $5, $20, if you do it for free because you're afraid to charge money, you're just like, well, I'll just pay whatever. You're wishy-washy. What's going to happen is the other person's going to be wishy-washy, and they have no reason to put down, right, that money. So I think this conversation for us as educators who are offering something to the world is, just, looking at our own issues around money. Like, are we willing to just, look at it that way? And then if you are a patron of a program, think about what value you are getting from that program, right? And also, and this is not to make anyone feel guilty, this is just to lay it out there. There are a lot of hours that are put into creating a program, whatever it is, right? Planning, getting Zoom, paying for Zoom. Like I can list off like a dozen different things that I pay for every month so that I can run my business. And I have a lot of free offerings out there. And that's not paying for the things that I need to pay. So what Jack is saying, I need to be sustainable plus, meaning I need to bring in enough, we're just going to say money, so that I can pay for the things so that I can teach you, right? And we don't talk about that. We look at the price tag and say, that's too much. Well, you're an artist. I'm not going to pay that. We compare it to other things. So all of us as nature journalers know what kind of experience we're getting from each other, right? We're all different. The other thing is an artist friend who went to art school. She shared with me, she's also an entrepreneur, something really helpful. She said that something that comes easy to you, right? Let's say that you're teaching whatever topic it is, you love it. You can live and breathe it and it's easy and it flows. And you think, well, why should I pay money? Because it's so easy. Well, you weren't born with it being easy. At least I wasn't, right? So if I look back on my entire life, all of those difficult experiences that I lived through, that I survived or learned things, made me who I am today, my personality wise, right? Emotional state. All of the nature journaling that I've done for the past 20 years has given me skills today. All the teaching I've done at all different platforms has helped me hone the way that I interact and connect with my students. So the fact that it's easy for me today to teach nature journaling is no reason to say that I should do it for free or for a low price. And also, if you are a creator or a teacher, know that your right students will find you and they will be happy to pay whatever price you put on. My goal is not number of likes or number of followers or number of people on my mailing list, right? Those metrics don't necessarily pan out to the money that flows in. So that's a lot. So one last thing I want to share that I think about a lot is I think of money as energy. So if we think about the word currency, we call money currency. Currency, a current flows, right? A current is moving, it's flowing. So money is energy. And so I had a mentor tell me that, when I receive money, to be willing to let it go. It comes in and I let it go. I receive money from my students. It goes into paying for Zoom, for my online platform, for my email server, for my website, and to hire a virtual assistant, or hire someone to help me do videos, or hire someone, right? So that overflow, right? If I allow the money to come in, then I can share it with everybody else and other people get paid. But if I'm afraid to charge money, then that money doesn't go to support those other creators. So if I see myself in this chain of this cycle, right? This part of this flow, that it's not just me getting money and receiving it. It just doesn't end there. It continues. So when I'm sustainable plus, I don't have to worry about buying shoes when my daughter says she can't wear her shoes, or that her sweater's too small. I know that I can do that and not feel crunched. I can also share that overflow of time and of money, right, with others, with the community. So actually, I get to do more because I'm willing to allow people to pay me this cash, right? So money's not a bad thing. It's something that we use. It's something we've created so that we can exchange goods and services. So I'm really excited that, we're having this conversation. I know it's really uncomfortable, and some of what we're talking about might just really like raise your hackles and might be uncomfortable, but know that, over time, the more that we talk about this, the more that we make it okay to discuss it, and we can share strategies on what kind of programs and pricing and, connecting with the community. What have you done that's been successful, that's helped you, so that maybe we can help more people build nature journaling programs all over the world. All right, I'm going to stop there.
Melinda, some really valuable and useful thoughts in there. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We'd love to bring more people in on this. What does anybody have any thoughts that kind of connect with that, or things that you're thinking about in this area, things that you are struggling with? I guess maybe something that you were mentioning there, I made me sort of think of, it might be helpful to for me to share how I'm kind of making this work on my end. It's still a hustle, but there are these different little income streams from all the different things that I'm doing. Donations have ended up for me being a huge part of that. Most of what I do is supported by donations. And so I just have a donation plugin on my website, and people who want to support me can put it, but I actually felt really nervous about first putting that up there. And then I felt really nervous about kind of, pinning a place where people could make donations at the sort of top corner of my sort of menu bar on the side. But once I did that, people started doing it. And it has been, so that's been a major support to me. I also do some programs that are pay programs. So the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday things aren't, but I'll do programs in schools. A lot of schools are really interested in doing programs. Also, there are parks and organizations, Audubon groups or California Native Plant Society groups will want me to come give a presentation about how to do that. And then they have a little fund for honorarium. And talking about the honorariums is also kind of weird, because different, there isn't a sort of set honorarium that people get. And some people get really big honorariums, and some people get smaller honorariums. So there's also kind of talking about the honorarium. Um, I found that also some organizations, they don't have a lot of a budget, but they're organizations that that you really want to support. I found it really useful to have a frank discussion with the person who is trying to schedule the program with me, where I say, all right, you know, these sorts of programs, they really help support me and my family. And I know that you're working within the constraints of your budget. So obviously for me, the more the better. And but we also want to work with you and your organization. Can you help me sort of figure out what, working with you, what is the sort of the best support that you might be able to give me, and it kind of get them working with me to set that honorarium. And that puts me kind of out of the position of having to guess what their budget is. And sometimes people come back and they say, like, we really, we have nothing. And sometimes they'll say, like, well, I'm going to go talk to the board and see what we can do. And, sometimes, they'll say, like, we're thinking of this, but we can offer you this. Would that work? And I go, like, oh yes, that will work. So being willing to include them in that discussion about, how can we make this win-win for both of us? So that helps me with that kind of honorarium discussion. I also, a big part of my income stream is from the store that I have on my website. And and at first it was just books that I sold, but then you can also sell stuff that other people made, I've discovered. And and there's you do have to have then all the logistics of shipping things and those sorts of things, but that has been another useful way of doing it. And the final kind of income stream that I have is from books. And on that, there isn't a really large return. The amount of royalties that you get from writing a book is not, it's much less than I thought it would be. But once the book is out there, then it's a passive income stream that is helping support you do what you do. And so that the next time somebody gets that, that's just, it's a little thing that's working in the background. And so that is, that's useful. So that's some things that what you were saying also kind of made me think about. Yeah, Melinda.
Yeah, I'll piggyback and on that. So there's been a lot of questions going on in the chat about how do we find those connections with schools, parks, etc. What I did last year is I just reached out to, during the very beginning of the March and April, I reached out to my local natural history museum. You might have one in your town. And I knew that they were closed for business. I'm closed for business. And maybe we could partner to create something to support our community online. And they were not doing anything online at the time. So I actually created something. I approached them and I said, look, I'd really like to work together, because I knew that in that partnership, my circle of people and their circle of people makes a bigger pool, and we can reach more people to let them know about nature journaling. Because my biggest goal is to share this connection with nature so that people can get more joy, wonder, peace, resilience in their life, and then making money to make it sustainable, right? So my first goal wasn't financial, although I need to put that into the picture. I talked to the person in charge of the educational programs or outreach coordinator or community coordinator, and I talked to her, and I offered a 6-week series. So I'm going to share what I did. So 6-week series, we agreed that it would be people can come for free, and that the museum would not charge me and I wouldn't charge the museum. So there was no money exchange between me and the museums. It was mutually beneficial. We saw that it helped the community and it helped all of us. So that was really helpful. I got a lot of people coming to those, over 100 people, and I didn't have the money to increase my Zoom account. So a lot of people couldn't come. And another way that I reached out was going to my local, there's an art school that in the community that teaches. So I taught a nature drawing class there. I approached my local parks. So depending on what your region is, maybe there's a parks district or state parks or something that you can reach out and just say, hey, you know, this is what I'm doing. Maybe we can have a conversation and collaborate. I also reached out to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which is in my town, and they were open for me to teach. I taught a 6-week program. Some of you came, teaching teachers how to teach nature journaling. And that was really fun. They actually had money in their budget to pay me. So I approached willing to do it for free, like with the museum. And they say, hey, we actually have some money and we can pay you a little money. And so there was some money exchange from that. And then the program was offered for free, and they managed the registrations and they got all the emails. So, you know, depending on who you work with, you just come to an agreement. There is no set way. This is all brand new. We're embarking on something brand new. We're creating these. You can also, talk to other business mentors and get all technical about this stuff. But also, I find that I'm really wanting to follow what feels good to me. So I've taught for the California Native Plant Society, invited me to teach nature journaling for one of their workshops. I've been on summits. So as I start to reach out more to the public, people see me, and I've been invited to the local museums, the libraries. That's another one. After school programs. So I did online after school programs. I did online summer reading. For the reading program, we did nature journaling. 2 different counties in my area I've done that for. Just recently now, I have an agreement with the Santa Cruz Museum, which is nearby. I'm going to do a monthly nature journaling thing. We haven't decided what we're going to call it, but it's like a class workshop kind of thing. So these are all up to you to reach out to people. And what's the worst thing they could say is like, no, we're not interested. Then you move on to the next one. You have to be willing to just keep going, because if you feel like it's the right thing for you, then you just keep going, right? We just don't give up. To be an entrepreneur takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of inner growth, personal growth as well. So those are the things. The other thing that Jack was talking about, passive income stream. I have taught many rounds of classes, and I prefer to teach live online instead of having people buy an e-course that's all recorded. I don't personally like those. I kind of fall asleep. And when I tried to record myself with no one in the audience, it felt very flat. I don't know if any of you tried this, but I'm like, who the heck is this? I'm looking at myself. I'm like, I don't like this. So I recognize that I do much better with an audience. So I've been teaching live online. However, I'm feeling like, coming back to Jack's Sustainable Plus, it's not sustainable for me to just keep doing this, cranking it out one at a time. I want to create some new things, and I don't want to do the same introductory class, yet I also want to offer that experience to new people, because there's always new people. So I'm in the process of cleaning up some of the recordings of the introductory Spark Your Curiosity class, and those will be available as on demand or e-courses or whatever you want to call it on my website. So those can be revenue streams that come in without my having to be present. That's where I want to go. And then I've started to my Sunday sessions. I do a lot of teaching in them, and I plan a lot, and I'm also using my expertise and experience. So I've also come to this place where I am comfortable to offer the live for free. And if you missed the live, I have it on my Zoom account. I'll send you a link. You could watch it for a few days, and then I have to take it off of my Zoom account because I'm not paid for the higher storage price. So I bring that video down, I edit it, and then I put it on my teaching platform. And then anyone who comes can purchase it at the donation price, but it's for sale. So there's plenty of free nature journaling content out there already. And so I felt like I need to make this sustainable. Otherwise, I'm looking at getting a job. And I know that's not right for me to go to work for someone else. I just feel it in my bones, you know. I really like the flexibility of creating my own program. Like when I was talking to someone, they wanted me to teach something very specific to fit their thing. And I'm like, I'm not sure if that really fits me, because I like the freedom to be able to teach whatever, you know, feels like it's me. So yeah, just know that you can, you know, approach anybody, approach your school. If you have kids, you know, I did this at my daughter's school. I said, hey, you have a summer program. Can I teach a nature journaling camp? And they said, yes, you know, and then go back to your old schools. Like, hey, I have teachers that I worked with when I was teaching at a school, and I've gone into the classroom to offer a program. Sometimes I do it for free, depending, like it's case by case. Like Jack said, it is, I'm not going out there and saying, well, I have to do this for this amount of money. Like I want to make it flexible. And so I have a price that I set, that I quote when someone says, I would like you to do a workshop. And I say, this is my price. And then they come back and say, oh, that's out of our price range. And I'll say, okay, well, you know, how can we make this work? And they'll say, well, we could do it for this amount. And then at the moment I can decide, you know, is it worth my precious time? Because my time is precious, right? My one wild, precious life. That time, is my time worth doing it for that amount of money? Or do I look at it as a service that would really benefit them, and I feel aligned with what they do? Or maybe there's something in common that, you know, just, so I do a lot of feeling into, you know, each situation. I don't have a cookie cutter. That's not the way that running business feels good to me. So that is, Chamber of Commerce. I'm also part of a business networking group. So, you know, I am part of this group weekly, and I meet online with other business professionals in all different areas of, you know, fields. And we exchange referrals. So that is another way to do that. Also, someone mentioned something about donations and business and taxes. I would just encourage you to go to your own city, county website and look up, do you need a business license to do this? How do you accept money? I would just not advise anyone to just, you know, just take money and not know what your, you know, business structure is. Like really be conscious about that to make sure that you're not doing something accidentally not legal. So I needed a business license to teach in one town, so I have that. There's a lot of little details, but I think that today the money thing, how do we reach people, is a good way. Also connecting with other people, you know, going and meeting folks that, you know, align with you, or meeting with other nature journal teachers. This is not about competition. This is what we're doing here, is we're collaborating with each other, right? No one here I'm looking at is in competition with anybody else. Each of you is individual. Like I'm looking at Barbara. I know Barbara teaches art and nature journaling. She's got way more technical art experience than me, but she's not a competitor. We're colleagues in this world. So if we can approach this nature journaling as everyone who's a nature journal teacher, the more nature journal teachers there are, the more choices, the more possibility that the world can embrace this, right? How many yoga teachers do you have in your town? Just one? Like, okay, my next door neighbor is a yoga teacher, so I can't be a yoga teacher? No. So it's the same thing with nature journaling, right? It actually works to your benefit if there are more nature journal teachers or people who represent nature journaling in an area than if you were the only one.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point, Melinda. So sometimes you think like what can I do that's unique? You don't have to be unique. You just have to be you. You will be different just because you what can you do, but what you can't, so you don't have to do something like, let's say everybody is teaching a class on nature journaling. Okay, right? But the way that I teach that is going to be different than the way that Aisha approaches that. It's going to be different than the way that Alexa is going to handle that. And so you want to think of like, what can you do that is uniquely valuable, right? The topic doesn't have to be unique, but you're going to bring something to it, a perspective that is different. And so I regularly encourage people to kind of get, to sample these other sorts of resources, so you can find other teachers who also really connect with you. We are in the process of developing a Wild Wonder Foundation. And part of the mission of this is going to be to help people who want to do nature journaling find mentors and teachers, help organizations that want to get a speaker find those local speakers, give educators such as yourself greater visibility. That's actually a big reason behind something like Wild Wonder. If you're a teacher at Wild Wonder, then your kind of recognition goes way up. So we want to kind of give opportunities for more teachers to be involved with that, so that people can meet you, and also that helps kind of your business to be more sustainable. I have a very kind of crude finder resource on my website. I have a page where, find a nature journaling mentor or teacher in your area. And I have, state by state, the names of, all the different organizations that have reached out to me. I've also created an interactive map of nature journal clubs so that people start to find other nature journal clubs. So eventually this functionality is going to be moved over to and sort of expanded on a sort of foundation website, so that you can make it easier for people to find us. Let's jump into, love to hear from more folks about thoughts, ideas, comments about this topic. Barbara, since you were called out earlier, we're going to bring you into the conversation here. Hey there.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Hi, Melinda. Hi, Jack. Yeah, as Melinda mentioned, I've been teaching art or cartooning really for 20 years, or a little bit longer. And I started over and over again. I started in Germany first. And before I was in the same mindset. I grew up pretty poor, and money was sort of a dirty thing for me. That's how I grew up. My whole mindset towards money was very negative. And I literally made a weekend seminar where I learned to change that mindset. And it really, what Melinda mentioned at the beginning really summarizes what I've learned that weekend about that money is a currency, it's a value. Everyone who works or offers what they are best at, they earn money for it, and it's a normal thing, like you mentioned before, Jack. And so that weekend, I didn't want to go too deep into it, but it really changed my mindset. And slowly I started not thinking too much about it and just saying, this is how much I'm worth, and putting a price tag on it and asking for it. And all of a sudden I had no problem. People would pay it. And so that was like about 15 years ago when things changed for me. And so I built up my business in Germany, and to a point where I made a decent income. And then I moved to the United States and had to start all over again. And I had the same experience in Germany as here in the United States. I connected, first of all, I have 5 children, so I was connected to schools already, but I also connected to the Chamber of Commerce, to museums, to the libraries. The libraries have a huge program here in the United States, I noticed. And so I've been teaching and offering workshops through libraries. And that really spreads the name. So if you're a good teacher and people like you, they come back to you. And people come to you eventually and ask if you want to teach a workshop or seminar. I worked at museums. I'm still working at the Charles M. Schulz Museum. I really like the Snoopy Museum. They have a really great children's program, and I get to teach classes there. And I'm actually offering my first nature journaling workshop there at the end of this month. So I'm really excited about it. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, those are all, everything that Melinda and Jack mentioned, that's exactly the route I went down. And the same in Germany as here, that's what was successful for me. Eventually, I had people asking for private lessons, and I started my business in my little garage and built it up in Silicon Valley. I used to live in San Mateo, and I have had my own little art school in my garage. And I ended up at the end, I had 40 students every week that came to my classes. And it was a full-time job for me, and I made really good income. It was amazing. And then we moved up here north, and now I'm starting over again. And then COVID happened. And here in Ronald Park is a whole different, the people are different here, and I have to approach the whole business idea differently again. And here I noticed going to the community events. So I went every week to the farmers market and had a tent there and would offer little workshops there. So the local people would get to know me, and that's how I built up my classes. And I went into the community centers. And so, yeah, so I just want to confirm really that's how it worked for me as well. However, I've never thought about donations. So I never, that's a whole new branch for me and something new to try out. So I'm so glad that I met this community, and I'm learning so much from all the meetings we have. So yeah, that's basically what I wanted to share. The first thing that had happened to me was changing my mindset about money, asking for money, and that my teaching and what I have to teach or to give is worth a specific amount, a currency, which in our society and civilization is money, basically. One more thing I wanted to mention, Melinda mentioned it before as well. When parents come to me and say, I notice they have trouble, they say, I can't afford it. I love exchanging services. That's actually how I met my best friend in Germany. Her 3 kids really wanted to take my classes, but she said, I can't afford it. But she's a great gardener, and I had this garden, and I'm not a gardener. So she came in and would take care of my garden, and in exchange, her 3 kids would come to my classes. We ended up being best friends, and we're still best friends after 12 years moving here. So we haven't seen each other in a long time. So anyway, so that's another option as well, to do exchange of services, which I really like.
That is really important, and also sort of along that line, like if I do something and you take it, and there isn't an exchange, as Linda was mentioning earlier, sometimes that is valued less. Oh, you're giving this away because it has no value. It is valueless. But if I'm willing to say, that this takes work and effort, and the donations that you make are really important, and that helps pay for access to this for people who can't afford that. So please consider that. Then that rings in a different way. And also, for people who aren't able to pay, if I'm able to say to them, if I like your idea of, like, you can do gardening, and so there's a real exchange there. But something that I've also been thinking about is just sort of the idea of, if you cannot pay for it, still to do an intentional act of kindness or of stewardship in lieu of money, as a way of saying, I took this and I value it, and so I'm giving back in this way. And I think that idea is very powerful. At least it resonates with me. But the idea that we can, out of, because you're asking people there to do a sort of an expression of gratitude, of connection with what you're doing, and it kind of deepens and extends what you're doing. And that is, I think that's very powerful, and also something to consider.
I'd like to add. Oh,
so Please.
Can I add to your comment? I want to flip that and say, sometimes we don't address the people who have a lot of money, because I think it comes from our own money issues. I know that is for me, right? I grew up really poor. Money was always something that we wanted to have that we could never have, that only rich people had money and we were too poor. So I forget that there are people who really, really want this experience. They are dying inside for joy. They are dying inside for peace and meaning and connection. Money is coming out of their ears.
Yeah.
But if we keep looking at with a microscope at the people that don't have money, then we're missing. So what I've done with my courses is I have 3 prices. I have this is the price set for the course. I'm still thinking about the wording, but I have one that's called student rate. So you can decide for yourself if you would like a student rate. I'm not expecting you to show any, evidence. That's up there. And then I have a pay it forward rate where I have $20 or $40 over the class price. And I have had people buy that. And in the wording, I'll say your extra money goes to support another nature journaler have access to this course. So that way I'm not always giving for free, because I do have seats where I give for free for people for very special circumstances. It's case by case. I know that the people that I see in the community that would really benefit, and I know that they would do really well and help enhance the whole community in the class, and I offer a seat. And other times the scholarship fund, right? If I get an extra $20, $40, $60, then that helps offset that gift that I'm giving. And someone who has more abundance and affluence as far as finances go can feel good about being of service through their community. So I want you to think about that, not to look at the lens of your pricing structure as though you were buying the program, right? What I mean is, let's say I'm going to say this is $50. Well, gosh, $50 I think is kind of high. Well, let's make it 20. Right. So instead of doing that, feel into like $50, it's going to be $50. If you can't pay $50, here's an option, half off or whatever. And if you are able to pay more, then there's another option there that they can donate to the fund.
Yeah, and that, I think that's and your idea kind of I'm going to bring Aisha in on this also. Your idea there about, in order to make that work, you need to be also talking to the people who have the funding. And that's something that I need to get better at. I will often address those who don't, but need to also kind of look at the screen and have a really direct conversation with the people who can fund it. So for instance, with the trips that I took to Tanzania, because of scholarships that people, I made this little fund where if you are able to, can you support other people? I was able to bring several people to Tanzania with me for, in some cases, no cost, other than their air transportation, and in others, reduced cost. But people really stepped up and they did that. But you're right. To make that work, I had to do kind of a deliberate ask. Aisha, hey there.
Two thoughts. One, just going back to your very early introduction today, back at 10 o'clock Pacific time. Thanks for sharing all your feelings about money and what it's worth. It's really nice that you started that way. I really, really appreciate it. We always need to acknowledge that underlying what's coming up. So thank you for doing that. And I found myself thinking about the fact that, you're talking about nature, artist, educators, that combo being low value. Well, I've been looking at the fact that if you're not an artist, but you're more like the plant botany person, that's actually a even lower rung in society. and that's where I am, right? I'm like offering some things, looking at offering some things in an organization and what they're willing to pay for an artist coming in to teach versus somebody who knows about plants is even more of a common good.
Yeah.
Even more. So, we don't even know how many people are going to sign up. They gave me the average range that their artists charge. And I was like, I'm going to go for the same. I mean, hell, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. It's just starting this and hoping I can network through it and see how it goes, or at least get some experience, start getting some experience in. But I feel like going back to the feelings about it, one thing I'm starting to realize I have to process soon is anger at society at this point. I've hit my 50s and I'm starting to feel rage that education is low value, arts are low value, nature is low value. I can be a lawyer or a computer or investment person and I could charge ridiculous amounts per hour. And I just feel a lot of rage. And I'm starting to I have to work through some of that and not bring it into my conversations with people as we try and straighten out what to charge, because the rage isn't necessarily at that person. So I want to share that thought. I don't know if anybody else is starting to have rage, but I'm definitely noticing that once I sort of left my school and gave myself time to think, I'm like, I'm not just angry at that school. I'm angry at the world we're in, and it ties into all of this as we try and value our own.
I love that. I love that, Aisha.
It's
totally
really
speak to me.
Coming up.
Totally. I love what you just shared. The low, I put it in the comments, but the low rung, let's flip it. Let's not think of ourselves based on income that comes in as artists and creatives. Let's flip that and let's make that ladder based on value. What kind of value do we provide to the community, to society? And let's stop saying that we're the lowest paid, because if we believe that, that's what we're always going to keep seeing and perpetuating, and frustration and rage come up. And I also want to invite you, Aisha, because I see this great energy in you, right? And instead of rage, what if you took all of that energy and instead of broadcasting out as rage is like, what good thing can you do? Can you inspire other people? Can you take action and just do something? Put a big price tag on something, put it out there. People will not buy our programs if we don't put it out there. I see so many entrepreneurs afraid for whatever reason, and we need to shift that. And I think one constructive way to take that energy, for me, I think of those emotions as a wake-up call. If I'm feeling physically ill or feeling that icky feeling, it means that I'm not living my true self.
Yep.
So what I'm doing is I don't run my business like what business experts and mentors would tell me. Like I've worked with coaches, and I'm unplugging from that. It does not feel authentic to fall in line with the traditional overarching way of running business, of pushing, of competition, of overworking, of tricking people, of climbing up this ladder, at someone's expense. It doesn't have to be that way. We can live authentically, genuinely, what feels right. And it's hard. I know it's hard because it's not what we see. But what has been really helpful for me is to connect with people with like minds, like we are today in this conversation, to keep connecting, to keep supporting each other, to keep coming back to our goodness, our single life that we have, this wild and precious life. Am I going to sit back and be afraid and do things for free and then not be sustainable and get a job? Yeah, I could do that, but I'm in midlife now and I'm not willing to do that anymore. So I totally resonate with you. It's like, dang it, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah, that's kind of where I've been. And, I've been taking an herbal energetics class, and they talk about the fire element, right? And they're like, the fire is there, work with the fire. And it's kind of like you're saying, flip it, don't ignore it because it'll eat you up inside instead. But what can you do with the fire? The other thing this is reminding me of is I put very early in the comments is, you know, I feel like I need to develop an elevator pitch, or we all do, to justify what we charge. Because we already at this organization that I'm working with the first time, we got an angry email from somebody who wanted to know why everything cost as much, you know, maybe needed a scholarship, but came at it from extreme anger. And I realized the organization was kind of new to or offering. They kind of got delayed because of the pandemic, and they weren't prepared, and they all forwarded it to me. And it was just kind of like a knee jerk, we should give this angry person a scholarship, because they were freaked out. And I was like, we have to develop a process, people. But I just started wondering, is that a common experience? Am I walking into sort of this self-employment, and there's going to be all these rageful people questioning the rates we set? Or is it is this kind of a one-off? I don't know. I was unprepared for that, because I was so excited about my classes and the people I was potentially going to have as students, and I was just like, ooh. So you see what I mean?
Yeah. Well, as far as what are their expectations, my general experience has been is that people have no idea what this should cost. And that you know, you can say that and people, it's just like with honorariums, they don't want to, the person who's developing the program, they don't want to insult the speaker by offering them an honorarium that's too low. And you know, and so there's like this, like nobody kind of knows how to handle it. And like, or let's say a piece of artwork, what is it worth? It totally depends on the eyes of the person who's looking at it. And then, you know, if you decide that because it is a Cezanne, then it's worth a whole lot of money. Not because of anything about it, but because it's a Cezanne, right? You know, our relationships with prices are just goofy and all over the map. So when you're pricing your artwork or your service, you just sort of know that both you, the same is true if you're like, I'm going to sell this painting, right? I need to put a price tag on this painting. Same with our services. The person who is coming and looking at that, if whatever price you'll put on it, they'll be like, oh, that's the price of this piece of artwork. And they look at it and they see that's $50, right? You could have put 500 on it, right? You could have put 1,500 on it. And their response at looking at it will be the same. It's like, oh, that's what that costs. And so it's totally subjective. One dangerous thing to be aware of, or thing to be aware of, is the anchoring heuristic in this. And the anchoring heuristic is that if I am expecting this to be a certain price, and you know, how does that expectation get in there? Often it's by the prices of other things that are around it, or completely unrelated things. So they've actually done these experiments where they say to people, all right, there's a house over here. Would you pay is it worth more or less than $5,000? It's a house, right? It's obviously worth more than $5,000, right? But because I asked them that question with a low thing, then when I turn them and I turn to them and I say, what do you think the value of that house is? They will give you a low number. And if I said, oh, is this price above or below 5 million, right? if I then ask, what is the value of that house? They will give you a high number. So most often what people are kind of reacting to is sort of, if there is some kind of anchor that gets in there, that can, so I've found with kind of like doing presentations and programs, you know, people would say like, you know, what do you charge for this, you know, full day program? And I'd be like, you know, like, I don't want to seem greedy. I don't, you know, no. And then I go like 500, and they'll go like, oh, okay. We'll talk with our board and kind of get back to you on that. And then they come back later and they say, okay, 500. But if I get, if I can kind of, I have to kind of steel myself for it and kind of go like, right. And I want to be able to say, oh, yes. So that program is 1,500. It's the same program, but I say 1,500, but I'm not saying it in a voice that's apologetic or questioning, like, did I just hurt your feelings? Then they go like, okay, I'll go talk to the board and we'll get back to you on that. And then later they come back and say like, yeah, 1,500. And they're like, that's better than 500, right? But it's also weird for us to kind of get ourselves to the point where we can say those numbers out loud. And so sort of getting yourself to sort of the point where you can practice and say, yes, so for a full day program, that's 2,500. And the person you're talking to probably doesn't have a point of reference.
Yeah.
Right. And so you'd like, oh, that's what those sorts of programs cost. And so I then put, and if having these discussions is difficult, I'm gonna do a little share screen here. Share screen. Hold on a second.
I think this is really valuable, Jack, that you're sharing, you know, your process and what you've done and your discomfort with saying a price, because the more that we see others, our peers, our colleagues put like increasing our prices, then it makes it easier for each of us to do the same thing.
Yeah, and you know, sorry, I'm going to jump in here too for a second. It was very helpful, Melinda, that you put in the chat that you can't make everybody happy. This is like any other situation. And it was such a good reminder, such a good reminder. Thank you.
So I've gone to my website, schedule an event over here. So there's, yeah, my suggested honorarium is 2,500 a day plus travel expenses. And so I put that in here because then it's an anchor.
Yeah. And
people will see that and then look like, oh, that's what that costs. And then you know, that's, and also if I feel then uncomfortable having these conversations, then I can also just direct people to that webpage. I think I need to have it a little bit clearer and a little bit further up on the screen here. But having something like that is useful. But that then also it's an anchor for that conversation with somebody.
Yeah, it sets an expectation higher than maybe they were thinking, right?
Right. And sometimes people have said like, we'd love to have you come, but we can't afford that. And they say like, oh, okay. Just tell me what would work for you. And they'd say this, and I can say like, okay, I can work with that. And what you, so there are when I'm thinking about like prices and things, for me, there are three big pieces. some, or I think of programs in sort of three different ways, or the degree to which these elements come in. Sort of, it's a Venn diagram. One circle on the triple circle Venn diagram is how well funded the program is and how deep their pockets are. I did a program at Apple, and they paid me well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, they're paying people like this because they're used to people who are called consultants coming in,
Mm-hmm.
and they're used to, you know, people like you're going into Apple, so that means, you know, let's take reason and multiply it by 7, right? But you know, different programs have different amounts of money, and so how well funded are they? That's a factor that it kind of goes into it. Another is how mission related is this for you, right? Is this an organization? Like for me, the Mono Lake Committee, I love me some Mono Lake Committee. And so Mono Lake Committee calls me up and they say like, Jack, would you do this pro bono project? And I'm like, I love you guys. And if I can, I will, right? So how close is their mission to yours? So are you extending your mission of what you want to be doing in the world by working with these people? And the third piece is the publicity that you get from it. What can they do to help you, right? What can they do? How are they going to put this in their newsletter? How are they going to put this on their website? How are they going to put this in all sorts of different places? And those with link backs to you and your website, how are they going to publicize this to their community to get a bunch of people who haven't experienced this before to come in and do something with you? Mm-hmm. So sometimes I will do programs for an organization that doesn't have a lot of money, but they're not really mission related, but it's going to really be great exposure, right? Sometimes I did a program, I've done programs for organizations where it's not really mission related to me, but they're going to be able to fund a lot of other people who are mission related. Mm-hmm. And also part of my mission is to feed my family. Mm-hmm. Right? It's okay to have your mission, part of your mission statement to be, I want to buy legumes, right? I'm going to get some beans and rice for the Jack. It's going to be okay. Again, you're trying to make yourself sustainable. Mm-hmm. Plus, right? So are they really, some organizations, for instance, I'm going to be doing this a program with the National Audubon Society. So there's mission overlap on drawing owls at the end of this month. For this, they're not being charged. They're giving me huge coverage through their networks and exposure to other people, right? So there I've got mission and I've got, exposure. It's a great deal. I'm like, oh yes. The last time I did something with them, there's just this huge bump in people going to my website and people buying things at my store. And I ended up making a lot of money for doing that free program just because that Audubon exposure then sent people to the website that also then connected them with the Nature Journal Club and all sorts of other things, but it also financially ended up helping me. But even if it didn't, I mean, that's how those things work. So I would sort of think about those three things and kind of how they kind of mix together in any one piece.
And sometimes we never know like how those connections happen. Because I did a whole bunch of free things for a local museum. I don't know if any of those people came and gave me I didn't get very many donations, but that was really not what I was going for. I was going for the publicity and also practice for me and feeling more comfortable and confident because I know what I know. Do I personally feel confident in my value? Right? That's what I needed to grow is my own value. And when I did that months later, people have said, oh yeah, I want to hire you to teach at my art week course. She had a private art week for her friends. And she said, I saw you at this free thing months ago and I really liked you. So would you come teach it? And she said, I'm paying my teachers this much money. And to me, I said, oh gosh, my rate is actually double. So I said, well, this is my rate. And then you know what she said? She said, oh, okay, I'll just have the students pay. And it was like, bingo. If I had been afraid and I said, okay, I'll do it, then I would have gotten half that money. So, but this takes time, right? So just know if you are in a place where you're totally afraid of charging anything, just know that it all has to do with your own, right? So what I mean is that there's nothing wrong with you. It's just what's coming up for you is a growth point for you, right? Once you gain that confidence about your own value and when you see your peers charging a certain amount of money, keep increasing their value, then you'll start to get more comfortable. So it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
So I just want to respond to two things that I've seen in the chat. One is people are asking about grants. So we are starting this Wild Wonder Foundation, and something we're going to be doing is going out after grants to support people like us. And also, ideally, if other people want to do, many grants are not given or only given to nonprofit organizations. So this will be a nonprofit organization. And so if people, for sort of a nature journaling purpose, want to apply for a grant on their own, they'll be able to apply through this foundation. And then we just be the pass-through to those people. So that will be that will be happening. But I also want to, there's a really interesting question that Sarah brought up about sexism and ageism in how we are valued, and looking at that, especially so if you are a woman and she's saying she's a youngish woman and she's worried that her expertise is not going to be taken seriously. I was wondering if there's anybody here with some lived experience that can address this, and I'd love to hear some thoughts on this, because I think that is, so if you are a young person, if you are a woman, if you are a person of color, we're in a I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm going to bring in Uvea. Spotlight. Hey there.
Hey there. This example is kind of a bit strange because this was back during a paid internship I had in high school, which I know is not quite the same as the real world. But I can definitely speak that there are differences. There was this particular time when we had a step system, which was sort of like giving us the idea of getting used to having promotions. And I had tried to do, we were also going through training on professionalism. And so I'd try to do the professional thing. I'd written a message to my boss saying, I'm ready to step up to step 3. I was in step 2. I was at that point, I think, one of the only people in step 2. And I said, I'm ready to step up to step 3. I've prepared my portfolio. It was rather huge. I've done the extra like project that we're supposed to do, which is, almost like having a presentation, like part of your portfolio as well. I did everything. When can we meet? And he said, oh, I'm a bit busy. And so we were writing each other emails back and forth for a couple of weeks, trying to figure out a time. We were sitting after work one day, doing our work. And my friend, who happens to be step 1, not step 2, came over, grabbed my boss and dragged him off. Just said, I need to talk to you. They left right then and there. Came back about an hour and a half later, laughing and smiling because he stepped up to step 2 right then and there. I was furious, and I wasn't allowed to be, because they looked down on me for being so angry. And then they had the nerve to inform me that they had changed the requirements of what happened between stepping up from step 2 to step 3. This is a guy who wasn't even in step 2 when they made this change. And suddenly I had to redo things, and I had to redo my own qualifications that had been just fine not even an hour ago, just because they decided, the two of them, two dudes who at that point were my friends, they decided to change everything as if my work meant nothing.
Wow.
I was furious. And I never got an apology for that. And they acted like I'd completely rained on my coworker's parade by not being happy for him that he stepped up. And there were other experiences. I mean, it wasn't so much relating to pay and to stepping up quite the same way like promotions, but definitely experiences where, you know, I might have a coworker, I might know more than my coworker. The coworker would be asked all the questions because the coworker was a guy or because the coworker was white, where I'm not. And so it definitely wears on your self-esteem after a while. And it definitely makes you feel after a while that you are not worth very much. And so that's something that I think people need to keep talking about and we need to keep acknowledging. And it's not complaining, it's not being petty. It's because we're trying to treat everybody better. Because if somebody treats you that way, you can be told it's a personal problem, but the reality is that it's also bringing other people down with you. Other people who might look like you, other people who might suddenly see the way you're treated, and then they won't have the courage to speak up.
And it's a systemic problem.
It becomes
and
systemic.
it is, and I saw this at my school too, Avea, so much. Where I taught, the male teachers would literally grab the boss, say, I have to talk right now. Or we'd hear them raging and screaming in there, and they'd get what they want.
Yeah.
And then during our reviews, anybody who complained was told, a woman, was that they weren't being flexible, they weren't being community minded. We never could drag off our boss and say, this has to be sorted out now. It was shocking to see, really shocking, because my school was actually run by women, but they were continuing that same systemic. And once I even heard of them say, oh, he's just that way, you know him. And I was like, excuse me? So, yeah. So I'm sorry. The other thing I want to point out is I had something very interesting happen in college. I went to an all women's college, which I really appreciated. And I was in the sciences, and they were trying to prepare us for going forth. And one thing they shared with me, I've always kept in mind, is they said, remember, most of you as women are programmed to not put yourself forth until you know 90% of the material. Your peers, if they're male, will generally feel confident to proceed only knowing 20% of the material. And they'll just bring that confidence with them, and everybody will buy into it. So kind of what Melinda was saying, we've been talking about, it was just like, be careful how you see your own worth. It was very interesting. It doesn't change it systematically, but it helped at least bring awareness to me to watch what was going on and watch myself also, that, oh, I was always waiting till I was at 99% before I felt like I could do a job.
Or who else has had the experience where you mention something either at a meeting or at several meetings and people overlook you, and then about 5 minutes later somebody says your exact same thing and everybody praises them and is like, oh, so-and-so, so smart. And then like, you might have the struggle of, oh, but more than one person can have this idea. Maybe I shouldn't draw too much attention to myself. Maybe I shouldn't be so possessive over the idea. But the thing is that if that comes into play later on when the person's being chosen for promotion, if that comes into play where a person gets a certain reputation at work and their work becomes more valued, it's difficult because that kind of thing puts people in competition, and it hurts. It hurts because you could be doing it different. Like we could find a way to do it so it's more of a collective, but instead somehow it works like this instead. I'm not making any sense, but
you're making plenty of sense. This is, and I'm sitting on the other side of this, sort of throughout my entire life, had this skin on me, and there are all these things that I didn't see. And I think that things are just the way they are because I've got, you just kind of go in there and you can and talk to it, and I've and talk it out. And then I've been told, like, go get them, attaboy, that's being proactive, right? And you do this exact same thing and you're being pushy, right? If you, I was looking at something recently where they had, you sort of write out the words you use to describe males and females, right? And in your sort of, in our sort of most sort of generic form, and then you wrote out the qualities of a leader. And you compare the lists, and I did this. It's scary. It's really, really scary. So does anybody have any thoughts and ideas about, in this specific situation, in this way where we're in sort of presenting yourself as a nature journaling educator, are there any sort of strategies or thoughts that we have for overcoming the bias that we're going to see because of age, because of your skin color, because of your gender? What's going to does anybody have any thoughts or strategies about how we can proactively address that in this community?
I think you're a good example, because as a leader in our community, and I know I said this before too, but because you set the tone, you already from day one set the tone of kindness. But what I've noticed, especially like after you teach and then you let people share, is that you also set the tone of listening. And it's proof that one person can change how a system works, even if it's a system just like the Nature Journal Club. And so I think that if we all kind of take that as an example, that the way that we carry ourselves has the potential to change the system with whoever interacts with us. So we think about the principles that we want to uphold. And somebody said this to me a while ago, and I find it useful whenever I'm getting too hard on myself, is that if we are having trouble recognizing our own self-worth in this, think about, would we want the other person standing next to you to be treated this way? Would we want our best friends to be treated this way? Would we want our kid to grow up and become treated this way? What would we say if they treated somebody we love very much in our family this way? Would you be mad on their behalf? And so the thing is that if we have these ideals about how we'd want the people we care about most to be treated, and then we act as though we need that treatment too, we're changing how the system works for the people we love, so that way they'll grow up in a better system.
That is powerful. Because when we think about ourselves, we think about I'm just going to tough through this. I'm going to tough my throat. I'm not going to make a scene. But when you then push that out to the next generation, or to the child, or to the other, all of a sudden, I mean, that is so profound. I'm going to write that down in my journal, and I would love for you to say that again, how I ought to document that.
Oh, okay, but I can't.
No
remember.
pressure or anything.
Okay, I'll try to say something that, okay, if we carry ourselves with the values that we want to see in the system, then we make the system more able to have the values for the people we love. You can reword that if it sounds better a different way.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alexa, thank you so much for joining us.
Why am I still on here, Jack?
Because then otherwise I'll feel lonely. See, now it's just.
Well, I'm going to share a comment since you've still got me on here.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
well, I'm gonna.
You finally took me off.
Hey, look who's back, everybody! It's our friend Aisha. She's
Oh,
got a comment to share with all of you.
Thank you.
I would-
Everything, yeah, everything Amaya said. And sorry to cut you off there, Jack. And I do want to ditto that it's true. You have so set a tone for this group, which is wonderful to be part of and is a model for me of setting tone, because I'm going to be working with adults for the first time, really, which is a bit scary to me. I'm used to working with kids. Other people tell them kids seems really scary to them. So I'm like, oh, okay. No, not a problem. But I kind of, embracing sort of part of this conversation, I realized, I have to walk into being prepared to discuss people's questions for me, which I'm sometimes uncomfortable with about my skin color, and immediately wanting to know my whole personal story within the first 30 seconds. And when I'm teaching classes, how am I going to set some boundaries around that? Because I'm not comfortable with telling my family history immediately, just because it shows in my looks, right? Or rather, one side shows, my mother doesn't show. And now I've literally started telling people, well, if I tell you about one, I'm going to give them equal airtime. So you're going to have to hear about both, even if one's not interesting to you. Because I want to honor my mother as much as my father. But it's just kind of like, you're in that position and now you're a woman and some people are seeing you as a woman of color. Other people are not, it's like, I don't know. I think I'm just blathering. I'm just.
No. And what is also, just for reference here, I am 55 years old. No one has asked me that question. And I mean, doesn't that just, when I was listening to Timothy Joe talk about drawing in nature and about how he always has to worry about kind of looking over his shoulder because he doesn't know who's coming up behind him as he's standing somewhere out in a field, and how he has to also, when he's out somewhere, has to look the part of the painter, almost as like the cartoon character of the painter, so that, with the, like, I clearly have an easel and the big brush, like all the Bob Ross gear, and otherwise, like, what are you doing out here in this field? And I've, when people kind of talk about privilege, when he was talking about that, I realized, like, I have never had to think about those issues before. I, even, think of, like, isn't it cool? My little journal kit, it's so surreptitious, right? And I've never, people are not asking me that question, like, like, so what's your ethnicity story? And it's just really interesting for me to see that, I've never had to answer that.
Where are you really from?
Yeah, no, really.
Comes up
Right.
a lot. Or like,
Yeah,
I live in,
because, like,
I
if
live
you
in
say
Marin.
Chicago, that's
I live
right.
in Marin, but no, but where'd you grow up? Oh, you want the whole story right now? No.
We just met. Because I need to put you in a box. I need to have a clear label on that box.
Or sometimes it's like, I feel like it's just they're just curious, right? And it's more interesting than asking everybody else they know, and they want an interesting story. And I'm like, I'm not here to tell that particular story. You can put me in box of naturalist today, because that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
fellow Fairfax resident, because that's the box I'm willing to share. And it's like, I realize from talking to other people, it's different for everybody. Again, there is, even that box is not a box. For me, it just happens that it involves pain of divorce and moves and dysfunction between cultures. So I don't like to go there when we're supposed to be looking at birds or plants or nature journaling, right? I was like, I'd like to stay out of that headspace, please. So it's been a learning process, and other people like to share their stories. It's part of their, let me educate the others that there's this diverse world. You know, I read some great books that were youth voices explaining being bicultural. And what was beautiful was how diverse it is.
Yeah.
Everybody had a different take on what they wanted to share or not share. So it's kind of finding one's own place, but learning to be like, that's not the conversation of the first 2 minutes. Thank you very much. Not for me anyway. Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm just saying the reason I'm also bringing it up here is like becoming an educator, you know, people also feel free to ask the teacher kind of anything, right? You're suddenly just put yourself out there sharing. So you have to sort of figure out what you're willing to share to create that open relationship and what you're perhaps not going to share, which could be different for different people, you know. I actually know, I'm looking at Rebecca, I hope you don't mind my bringing this up, but I knew somebody in college who had gorgeous hair and cut it off. She was so sick of that being the focal point of everybody. We love your hair. And she's like, there's more to me than my hair. And then it was all gone one day. And we're all like, where's your hair? And so she spoke up, and we never would have realized that she was sick of that. It was very interesting. I've never, ever forgotten. Whenever I see somebody with really hair that really impresses me, I just keep my mouth shut. I don't know them well enough. Why would that be the first thing I say? It's again commenting on their physical appearance that they were just born with.
Yeah.
So sorry to drag you into it, Rebecca. Maybe you're sensitive about your hair. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Actually, the curly hair, in my experience of my life, most people don't like curly hair. Or like I get compliments about it sometimes, but also I've had a lot of like, oh, well, why don't you straighten your hair? Because that was really popular, you know, when I was in middle school. And what I never realized until I think I was in college is that there's like a huge like racism aspect of not liking curly hair. And that's where that comes from. And yet even, you know, even if you're white, then it's seen as like, you know, less professional or whatever to have curly hair. But yeah, so it's a complex
Wow,
thing
it's
with
less
curly hair.
professional to have curly hair. Interesting. And probably more likely for a female teacher's hair to be commented on than Jack's hair, right?
Yeah, the only time people have commented on my hair was when I let my daughters give me a haircut. And yeah, I gave them, and they could do anything they wanted. And the agreement was I would keep it for 1 week. And it was exciting. They had a razor and chose to use it, or one of the ones, and you chose to use it some places and not the others. And I got comments on that. And then when I finally shaved it all off, I got other comments about my hair, and it's since grown back. And then nobody comments about that. No. But yeah, if you let thing 1 and thing 2 cut your hair, then you will. It is a conversation starter. So before we close here, see, I should, and I'm not as uncomfortable because also Rebecca's here, right? So there's at least several of us. But before we close here, I'd want to check in and see if there's anyone else who had some thoughts, comments, or ideas that they wanted to share, but hadn't had an opportunity to do that. I would also like to thank folks for this wide-ranging and lively, useful conversation. And not seeing any other hands raised. Oh, Vea saying you want to let them cut your hair. Oh, yeah, there we go.
Oh my God, that just gave me the best idea.
Oh,
Okay, so, okay, or maybe not, but you know,
no. but
I,
it sounded as good before you started to say it.
I am the mad botanist for a reason. Okay, so first of all, if your girls ever like debut as barbers, I want them to call it adventure hair. Secondly, what if we what if we just remember to start training our kids early? I mean, I know some people already do this, but like train them early, especially kids who are traditionally taught by society, you know, to not expect money. What if we start training them early by giving them like, you know, giving them little jobs and like paying them, but teaching them to expect real compensation. It's not like, you know, just, oh, $1 for allowance or whatever, but like actually trying to do a thing with them as early as we can, as a way of training our kids to, you know, to not downsell themselves or whatever I'm trying to say. This sounded way better in my head when I had the words.
Yeah. So you're saying that that they should start to the idea that in your work is going to be compensated fairly.
Yes.
And perhaps we should start teaching those sorts of lessons. So certainly whatever we've been doing to kind of teach people lessons about money, we ended up pretty confused.
I don't know how much I don't know how much barber stuff usually costs. Usually wherever I go, it's $20. But if somebody tells me that it's a better price, somebody tell me what the price is for the average barber, and I will pay your girls, Jack, to cut my hair the average price of a barber. I will not pay them some pity $5 bill. I will pay them whatever the actual price is at a barber shop, because that's what they're worth.
I think you should first see the haircut that I got.
I saw the haircut you got.
It was pretty exciting.
What if I make a specific request? Maybe I could just ask them to just do my split ends.
I think they would enjoy doing that.
The point though is that I would pay them as much as they would make at a barber shop.
I like that idea. I like that.
I would jump into your earlier, like maybe they're at the age where learning about trade is still really important. And I'm sure there's things you're doing for them, Ivea, and giving them and making it clear you value it, but you might trade something instead of money because we want them to all be part of that society too. I don't know. I just bring that because like my students always wanted to charge for everything we did in the garden. And sometimes I was like, what about generosity? What about just covering our costs? Like, how do we find that balance? Kind of goes back to everything we've been talking about.
Exactly. The balance.
There's a time for money and there's a time for, oh, this person, you know, gave me 5 hours of their time or played with me or, you know, is going to give me some art materials or lessons or, you know, I don't know what Ivea you do with the girls, but.
Also, maybe it depends on the kid as well. On the person in general. There'll be some people who have already a pretty high opinion of like, you know, them being worth a lot. And with those kids, you might want to also temper them with the idea of generosity so that they have a balance.
That's
and then
true.
you'll have
I was working with private schools, so I was obsessing with getting away from money and trying to teach some generosity. So yes, that's such a good point. Whereas if the money is more needed, that's what you offer. Thank you.
Precisely. And if the kid's self-esteem, it also depends on the kid's self-esteem a lot. And that's the sort of thing that like we shouldn't just dismiss as hormones or whatever that will balance. I mean, every step of the way, you're reinforcing whether the self-esteem can, you know, be healthy or not, every single step of the way. So working with the kid, you have to figure out what they need in that moment. But that's a whole other discussion about parenting.
But isn't it interesting how we started with thinking about our own kind of relationship to money and about how that makes this whole conversation confusing. But here we are at the end, we're looking at how do we help our children, our own children, or the youth that we work with, also develop their a better relationship with money.
That's where I was going, and you said it so much more organized than my head. So thank you.
No, that's totally appropriate to bring that up. I love that idea. The approach which we've taken over here for the for money with my daughters is if they want to do additional chores and things to raise money, they'll let us know, and then we'll kind of give a project. but each week they get an allowance, and the allowance is divided equally in 3 jars. One is they are saving it, and for at some point in the future this is going to be useful, and so that the save one is sort of over time. The other is their spend jar, and that is money that they can use to spend on things that they deem are important. And the third is the give jar, where they are going to get money and then be able to donate that to a project that they think is worthy. So teaching them the save, spend, and give as sort of 3 ways that you want to think about what you do with your money. And Carolyn, she decided she'd, Bat Conservation International, that's her jam. Yeah.
That is wonderful. Thank you. That's also a wonderful example to follow about how to help our kids have that. So thank you for modeling that and for telling us how you do that too. Might have to start doing that with my son.
Yeah, it's fun and then you can see the save one grow, and then you can have a whole conversation about the saving, a whole conversation about the giving, and whatever they give, then there's the matching fund from mommy and daddy. So we will double their dollar in whatever they decide to donate to. And then if there are things that they want to get, they can use their spend for that. So it's fun. So that's my 2 cents on allowance. So we're now officially 53 minutes over our time. I got to tell you, I love hanging out with all you folks. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. I want to encourage everybody just to jump over to the gallery view, turn on your cameras, wave goodbye to your friends, and thank you for this conversation. We look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Goodbye, friends.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you
Thanks so
tomorrow.
much.
Bye.
Oh, good to see
See you
you, Ray
tomorrow,
Bonte.
everybody.